The grief of losing a mother has no corporate memo. Julian Thorne knew this as he fled his own world, the corner office that awaited, the empty condolences echoing through the hushed halls of Thorne Tower. He had lost the only person who saw him beyond the title, beyond the inherited bloodline, beyond the mask he'd worn since boyhood. Now, alone in a boutique hotel room in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, he felt the weight of silence like never before. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He simply existed, suspended between his grief and the obligation to return and assume a position that felt like a tomb. On that sultry September afternoon, Julian rented a car and drove aimlessly. The streets blurred, faces rushed past, and he felt as though nothing made sense anymore. Until, almost by accident, he entered a small plaza tucked away between old buildings. The engine died. Silence returned. But then something happened. A female voice cut through the air. It was sweet, yet firm. Lacking academic technique, but imbued with something he couldn't quite name. Soul, perhaps. Faith. The melody spoke of healing, of paths that illuminate when all seems lost, of hope that blossoms where no one expects it. Julian lifted his eyes and saw her. She was young, a simple sundress swaying in the breeze, her acoustic guitar an extension of her own body, worn sneakers on the uneven pavement of Mariachi Plaza. Sofia Ramirez sang for no one and for everyone all at once. A few people stopped, placed dollars in the worn guitar case at her feet, and moved on. But Julian stayed. He stayed because for the first time since his mother's death, he felt something shatter within his chest. Warm tears traced paths down his face, hidden beneath the baseball cap and dark shades he wore to blend in. He, educated to control emotions, trained never to show weakness, wept like a child before a stranger who sang of light amidst the darkness. And then, she looked at him, not with curiosity, not with pity, but with a compassion that didn't judge, that demanded no explanations. Sophia smiled as she finished the song, as if she knew exactly what he was feeling. Julian returned the next day. He hadn't planned it. He simply woke up and drove to the same plaza, as if an invisible force guided him. Sophia was there again, tuning her acoustic guitar beneath the shadow of a gnarled tree. When she saw him, she offered a slight nod, like someone recognizing a familiar face but not intruding. He sat on the same stone bench, hidden beneath his baseball cap, and waited. Her voice again filled the air. This time, she sang of the father she'd lost too soon, of the guitar he'd given her as an inheritance, of continuing to sing to bring hope to those who had lost their own. Julian closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel. There, far from the guards, the advisors, the suffocating protocols, he was just a man who suffered, and that was liberating. When the last note dissolved into the wind, Sophia put away her acoustic guitar and walked over to him. She carried 2 cheap paper cups of coffee from a local panaderia. "You look like you could use this," she said, offering him one of the cups. Julian hesitated. He'd never been given anything so simple, so human. In gilded boardrooms, they poured him rare vintages in crystal flutes. But nothing had ever held the warmth of that coffee, served by calloused, generous hands. "Thank you," he murmured, accepting it. They sat side by side on the bench. Sophia spoke of her father, of music, of the faith that kept her standing even when money was scarce. Julian spoke little, but his silences were honest. She did not press him. She simply listened, as if his grief were familiar. as if she understood that some pains cannot be confined to words. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, observing his features. "Yes, very far." "And what brought you here?" Julian took a deep breath. "I lost someone, the most important person in my life." Sophia nodded slowly, saying nothing. She placed her hand over his for an instant, a brief gesture, but one he felt to his bones. "The pain passes," she said softly, "but only when you allow it to." He did not reply, but something inside him began to yield. Julian returned every day that week, always at the same time, always on the same bench. Sophia welcomed him naturally, as if he were part of the plaza's routine. They spoke little, but the silences between them ceased to be uncomfortable. They became intimate. He watched her sing, observed the way she closed her eyes as she played, how she smiled at strangers who paused to listen, how she thanked each coin with genuine sincerity. And then, in an impulse even he didn't understand, Julian decided to reveal part of the truth. "I'm not just a sad traveler," he said. One afternoon, as the sky threatened rain, "I'm someone who ran from his own world for a few days. Someone who needs to return soon to take on responsibilities that, frankly, scare me." Sophia tilted her head, curious. "What kind of responsibilities?" "Too great for a man who has lost his compass." She smiled tenderly. "Sometimes we only find our way when we stop looking so hard." Julian felt his chest tighten. She didn't know who he was. She had no idea she was speaking with the future CEO of Thorn Enterprises, one of the most influential global conglomerates based out of Wall Street. And this ignorance made her even more luminous in his eyes, because Sophia saw him only as a man, only as Julian. "What do you have faith in?" he asked, breaking the silence. "In God, in music, in the good people who still exist in this world, and in you." "In me?" "Yes, because any man who cries listening to a song about hope still has a heart, and a heart always finds a way to heal." Julian looked away, unable to meet the intensity of such genuine simplicity. He, who negotiated international deals, who commanded meetings with world leaders, felt stripped bare before this woman who lived by street music and unshakable faith. That night, alone in his hotel room, he decided. The next day, he would invite Sophia to dinner. He would reveal a little more of himself. He would take a risk. But fate had other plans. But the bench was empty. Her acoustic guitar was nowhere in sight. Passers-by hurried past, indifferent. Julian waited 10 minutes, 20, half an hour. A gnawing unease began to consume him, bringing raw memories of losing someone without warning, without farewell, without a chance to say what needed to be said. He approached an old woman selling flowers on the corner. "The young woman who sings here, have you seen her today?" The woman shook her head, regret etched on her face. "She didn't show up. They say she's sick." Someone mentioned she was taken to the community hospital last night. Julian's world imploded. He ran to his car, driving wildly through the narrow streets of Boyle Heights until he found the community hospital. He entered without revealing his identity, without drawing attention, simply following the desperate instinct to find her. He inquired at the reception desk. He insisted, until a tired nurse, moved by the urgency in his eyes, whispered a room number. When Julian pushed the door open, his heart seized. Sophia lay on a narrow bed, paler than he had ever seen her, connected to IVs and monitors. Her dark hair fanned across the stained pillow. Her lips were cracked, her breathing irregular. Severe pneumonia, the doctors had said. She had sung for hours under torrential rain at a charity event, refusing to stop as long as there was anyone listening. Julian sat in the cramped armchair beside the bed and held her hand. Cold. Fragile. So, unlike the vibrant woman who had sung with such power just days before. "No," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "Not this time. Not you." The trauma surged back with violent force. He had already watched a woman he loved waste away, powerless to save her. But this time, Julian refused to lose. This time, he would fight. He spent the entire night there, holding Sophia's hand, as if it were his sole anchor in the world. Julian never left the hospital. He ignored calls from Thorn Enterprises, urgent messages from advisors, reminders that he needed to return. Nothing mattered but this woman fighting against the fever that relentlessly climbed, against the infection spreading through her lungs. He slept in the uncomfortable armchair, ate poorly, suspended between hope and despair. In a quiet afternoon, he found Sophia's notebook among her belongings. He hesitated, but curiosity won. He opened it. Pages and pages of handwritten lyrics, unfinished songs, verses crossed out and rewritten. And then, in the middle of the notebook, a song dedicated to him, "The Wall Street Ghost of Mariachi Plaza." Every verse was a silent testament to what she had felt. It spoke of a lost man who arrived unannounced, of sad eyes that hid oceans of pain, of honest silences that said more than 1,000 words. It spoke of how she had begun to sing for him, even without knowing his name, because she perceived he needed light. Julian closed the notebook with trembling hands and wept. He wept because no one had ever written about him that way. He wept because Sophia had truly seen him, beyond the title, beyond the wealth, beyond the mask. He wept because now, finally, he understood what it was to love someone not for what they could offer, but simply for who they were. The doctors entered, their faces grave. The infection persisted. Her body fought, but weariness began to take over. Julian, accustomed to geopolitical decisions, to controlling nations and destinies, discovered he had no power over the only destiny that truly mattered to him. That night, alone in the cold hospital corridor, Julian knelt and prayed. He hadn't done that since he was a boy. He didn't know if God would hear him, but he pleaded nonetheless. "Don't take her from me. Not now. Not like this. Please." And then, on the 4th day, it happened. Sophia squeezed his hand, slowly, weakly, but real. Julian lifted his head, his heart pounding. Her eyes opened slowly, confused, searching for focus. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You stayed." Julian smiled through his tears. Always. Sophia slowly discovered that the man who had spent nights by her side was not just a sad traveler. The doctors had inadvertently mentioned that someone of great influence was covering the private treatment, ensuring the best care. When she asked, Julian could no longer hide it. "My full name is Julian Thorn. I'm the heir apparent to Thorn Enterprises, a global conglomerate headquartered in New York." The silence that followed was dense. Sophia stared at him, processing. A Thorn. A future CEO. One of the most powerful men in the world. And she? A street singer who barely made rent. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, her voice thin. "Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as just Julian, and I didn't want to lose that." She looked away, insecure. "I don't belong in your world." "And I didn't belong in yours," he replied firmly. "But you welcomed me anyway. You gave me cheap coffee with cinnamon. You listened without judgment. You wrote a song about me without knowing my name. Sophia, you saw my heart before you saw my title. I won't allow my name to create distance between us now." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Julian. Scared I won't be enough for what you need." He gently held her face. "You are already everything I need." When Sophia was discharged, Julian offered her a temporary rental home away from the reporters and curious eyes already sniffing out the story, with private medical care until she fully regained her strength. She resisted, proud, but he only insisted on matters concerning her health. It's not charity, it's care. Their life together in the simple yet comfortable home strengthened the bond between them. Sophia taught him to cook tortillas, laughing when he burned the masa. Julian showed her old letters his mother had written when he was a child, translating line by line with a choked voice. These were intimate, yet deeply respectful moments, built with delicacy and time. Until one night, she picked up her acoustic guitar. Her fingers were still weak, but the music flowed back like a river finding its course. Julian sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, just listening. She sang the unfinished song, The Wall Street Ghost of Mariachi Plaza, now with new verses. Verses about hands that held hers in the dark, about prayers whispered in a distant tongue, about love born where no one expects. When the last note dissolved into the air, Julian stood and knelt before her. "Sophia Ramirez, I lost my mother and thought I'd never feel light again. But you gave me back my faith. You gave me back the will to live. I don't want to go back to Thorn Enterprises without you. I don't want to assume the CEO position alone. I want you by my side, not as a subject, not as a symbol, but as a partner. Faith with faith, grief with grief, light with light." She touched his face, her eyes glistening. "Are you sure? Because the world will judge. They'll say I'm not worthy, that I lack lineage, education, preparation." "Let them speak," he interrupted, firm. "I choose you, every day, forever." Sophia cried and smiled at the same time. "Then yes, yes, Julian, I'll go with you." They embraced tightly, like those who finally find home. But Julian knew the path wouldn't be easy. Thorn Enterprises would resist. The board would question. Tradition would weigh heavily, but he was ready to face it all. Because for the first time, he wasn't fighting only out of duty. He was fighting for love. Days later, he took her back to Mariachi Plaza, where it all began. Sophia, still frail but standing, held her acoustic guitar with trembling hands. People began to gather, recognizing her. Some had waited for weeks, worried. When she began to sing, the entire plaza fell silent. Her voice echoed with renewed strength, singing about healing, about faith, about improbable loves that defy the impossible. And when she finished, Julian did something no CEO had ever done. He knelt before her, publicly, before strangers, and asked for her hand once more. "Julian, Sophia, will you be my wife? Not within Thorn Manor, not in a Wall Street gala, but here, where it all began." She said yes amidst tears and applause. But Julian did not falter. He organized a press conference, broadcast live to the entire corporate world. Seated beside Sophia, who wore a simple yet elegant dress, he spoke with a gravitas few had ever witnessed. "My people, I lost my mother, the beloved matriarch. And in that grief, I found a woman who taught me anew what faith, compassion, and courage truly mean. Sophia holds no dynastic title. She has no lineage, but her heart is larger than any Thorn Manor. And it is with that heart that I will build my legacy. Those who cannot accept my choice cannot accept me as their leader." The silence that followed was palpable, but gradually, messages of heartfelt support began to pour in. Ordinary people, weary of empty corporate formalities, saw something rare in Julian and Sophia's story: truth. genuine love. The wedding was slated for 3 months hence. Sofia insisted on incorporating Mexican traditions. Mariachis would play alongside Thorn Manor's classical ensemble. Gourmet taco food trucks would serve alongside elegant canapés. Thorn Manor's gardens would be adorned with vibrant papel picado and marigolds, and fabrics hand-embroidered by women from her old neighborhood. Julian agreed to everything, joyful to witness their two worlds intertwining. But as the date drew near, Sofia began to feel the weight. Sessions with image consultants, high society etiquette lessons, Thorn family history, the pressure to memorize names and protocols. She tried, but felt herself suffocating. One evening, she found Julian alone on the terrace of Thorn Manor, gazing at the distant city lights under the full moon. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed, her voice fracturing. "I'm just a plaza singer, Julian. I don't know how to lead this corporation. I don't know how to be your corporate matriarch." He pulled her close, enveloping her in a tender embrace. "You don't need to know how to lead," he murmured. "You just need to keep being who you are, my love. The rest, we will learn together." She took a deep breath, finding an unwavering strength in his words. Together, always. Thorn Manor's gardens were transformed. Colorful fabrics danced in the breeze. Wildflowers mingled with cultivated roses, and the aroma of cinnamon and cardamom filled the air. Guests from two disparate worlds converged. Titans of industry alongside humble neighbors from Sofia's old block. Women in designer gowns beside senoras in hand-embroidered rebosos. Sofia Ramirez entered, carrying her father's acoustic guitar as a symbolic bouquet. Her simple white dress was unadorned. Her hair was loose, the single flower tucked behind her ear. She walked slowly, her eyes fixed on Julian, who waited at the makeshift altar beneath an ancient tree. When she reached him, Julian held her hands and whispered, "You look beautiful." "I'm scared," she confessed softly. "Me too, but we're together." The ceremony blended English and Spanish. Ancient blessings were recited. Mariachis played as the sweet scent of jasmine and marigolds perfumed the air. When it was time for the vows, Julian set aside the text prepared by his advisors and spoke from his heart. "Sofia, you found me when I was lost. You gave me faith when I had none left. You taught me that love isn't about grandeur, but about truth. I promise to honor you every day. I promise to protect your music, your essence, everything that makes you who you are. And I promise to build a legacy where people like you have a voice." She wiped away her tears and replied, "Julian, I don't know how to be a Thorn matriarch, but I know how to be faithful. I know how to love with everything I have, and I promise to walk by your side, not behind, not ahead, but side by side. Always." They kissed amidst applause that echoed across the sprawling grounds. The celebration lasted until dawn. Sofia sang, accompanied by musicians blending both cultures, and Julian danced with her under the stars, without thought for protocols or judgments. Just two hearts that had found a home in each other. Months later, Sofia recorded an album inspired by her journey. She titled it, "Light Amidst the Rubble." The song spoke of faith, healing, improbable loves, and the courage to defy the impossible. The album became a phenomenon, not by marketing, but by truth. Julian, now at the helm of Thorn Enterprises, reformed social programs and instituted music scholarships for underprivileged youth. Julian led Thorn Enterprises with a firm hand and a compassion he learned from Sofia. The enterprise flourished, not just economically, but humanly. Music schools were opened, cultural centers established, and for the first time, ordinary people had a voice in decisions emanating from Thorn Tower. Sophia continued singing. She hadn't completely abandoned the streets. Once a month, she would return to East LA and perform in the same mariachi plaza where it all began, always crowded, always moving. Julian would accompany her when possible, sitting on the same stone bench, listening as he had years ago. But on that particular night, something was different. They were on the terrace of Thorn Manor, alone under the starry sky above the estate. Sophia held Julian's hand with unusual strength, her gaze shining in a way he knew well. "Julian," she began, her voice thick with emotion. He turned fully to her, his heart quickening. "What is it?" Sophia smiled, tears in her eyes. "We're going to have a baby." The world stopped. Julian closed his eyes, emotion taking hold of every part of him. He embraced Sophia tightly, feeling the future pulse between them. He thought of his mother, who would never know her grandchild, but who had somehow guided her son to this extraordinary woman. He thought of all they had overcome: pain, prejudice, distance, tradition. And he understood. He understood that God, or destiny, or chance, had given back everything he thought he had lost: family, faith, future. That this story, born in Mariachi Plaza, nestled in the heart of East LA, was never a coincidence. It was purpose. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder, listening to Julian's heart beat strong and steady, like a drum of hope. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "It will." He agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Because we're together." And beneath the endless sky, two hearts that once met by chance continued to beat in perfect harmony, proving that true love needs no gilded boardrooms, no ancestral manners, no corporate mandates. It only needs truth, and they had that in abundance. The end.